victims. 11 white stars of David stand outside the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And behind each one, a name, a story, a life ended, a family grieving an unimaginable loss. Some were grandparents in their 80s and 90s. Melvin Wax was 88. He's remembered as a sweet guy who was always early for service, dressed to the nines. His wife died a couple of years ago. Friends say he spent a lot of time helping out around the synagogue.
Mel Wax was a gentleman and a scholar. He made every service. He was always in a suit, in a sport jacket and a tie. He was always telling us corny jokes and could barely hear.
Mel Wax. Cecil and David Rosenthal, two brothers in their 50s, lived together near the synagogue. They had developmental disabilities, were inseparable by all accounts, and absolutely loved going to the Tree of Life, according to friends who spoke to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Cecil's obituary described him as the honorary mayor of Squirrel Hill. A college student who met Cecil through a buddies program says Cecil loved people.
He was a gregarious individual. He loved being social. He loved to laugh. He just liked being in a community, and I think that's why he was such a strong practitioner of his faith. He loved being Jewish because of that sense of community.
Richard Gottfried was a dentist who often did charitable work and would treat patients who couldn't afford dental work. Gottfried was set to retire in just the next few months. Daniel Stein was 71, and he had just become a grandfather. He was seen as a real leader in the congregation. He was president of the synagogue's men's club and was passionate about his community. He's described as somebody that everybody liked, with a generous spirit and a dry sense of humor. Rose Mallinger was 97. She was dedicated to her children and her grandchildren, they say. A local Jewish leader told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, "You've never met a more vivacious 97-year-old. Her daughter was wounded in the shooting. She's expected to survive." Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz was 66, a family physician who was beloved by his patients and was, quoting here, the kind of doctor that treated the whole person. That's how friends and colleagues described him to the newspaper. A doctor who worked with Rabinowitz told the Post-Gazette, "I've been taking telephone calls all morning long from patients." Irving Younger was 69. He went by Irv to one and all, a friendly and familiar face around the synagogue. According to the local newspaper, Irv always showed up early and stayed late to help folks out, greeting people, handing out books, guiding folks to their seats, and would never walk away from anybody. Husband and wife, Sylvan and Bernice Simon, were 86 and 84 years old. According to the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, they were married at the Tree of Life Synagogue in a candlelit ceremony more than 60 years ago. A longtime neighbor and friend told the Associated Press they did everything as a team and were always ready to help each other. Joyce Feinberg was 75, a retired researcher at the University of Pittsburgh. Graduate students told the Post-Gazette that Feinberg was like a mom to all of us, who welcomed them into her home and sent out holiday cards. More than half of the entire Jewish community in all of Greater Pittsburgh lives in and around Squirrel Hill. It is beloved beyond description. It's home to Jewish private schools, nearly a dozen synagogues. Squirrel Hill also happens to be the real-life Mr. Rogers neighborhood where Fred Rogers himself lived and died. Squirrel Hill, forever now. About this. The man suspected in this unthinkable horror of hate, gunning down those 11 people, made his first appearance in court today, and our Matt Finn was there. He's at the courthouse now in Pittsburgh. Hello, Matt.
Shep, 46-year-old Robert Bowers was wheeled into the federal courthouse behind me in a wheelchair. He's still recovering from the gunshot wounds he sustained during a shootout with police after that massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue here in Pittsburgh. A judge read the suspected gunman all of the 29 federal charges against him, including using a firearm to commit murder, injury to a public safety officer, and hate crimes. Bowers was in court in hospital-issue garb. He seemed alert and of clear mind, answering yes or no when asked questions by the judge. Bowers acknowledged that he received a copy of the criminal complaint filed against him by an FBI agent, and that criminal complaint reveals disturbing details about the synagogue massacre. A portion of the complaint reads, quote, during the course of his deadly assault on people at the synagogue and simultaneously with his gunfight with responding officers, Bowers made statements evincing an animus towards people of Jewish faith. For example, Bowers commented to one law enforcement officer in substance, "They're committing genocide to my people. I just want to kill Jews." Bowers' repeated comments regarding genocide, his desire to kill Jewish people, and that Jewish people needed to die. Right now, Bowers is being held without bond, still in federal custody. His next appearance is scheduled for November 1st, and he will enter a plea at a later date. Shep.
Matt Finn, live in Pittsburgh for us. So is everyone there and all the rest, more than those 11 victims. Survivors are talking about what happened during the shooting and how they made it out alive. 3 different congregations were meeting inside that synagogue when all this happened. Barry Werber says he was in the basement of the building when he heard crashing sounds and then saw a body on the stairs. He and a few others say they hid in a storage closet. Werber says he called 911 but was too scared to say anything. As we reported, in addition to the 11 dead, the gunman injured 6 people, including 4 officers of the law. Garrett Tenney is outside the synagogue in Pittsburgh now. Garrett?
Yeah, Shep, and we've heard from several survivors who say it's a miracle in itself that they are still here today. And there are a lot of folks who played a role in making that happen, including the 4 officers who were injured in this attack. One of them, who was hit by either a bullet fragment or a piece of glass, was released from the hospital on Saturday. The other 3 who were shot by bullets during the gunfights that ensued after this attack commenced, several of them remain hospitalized. One of them, a 27-year-old, was released this morning, but a 55-year-old is still being treated and is listed in stable condition, while a 40-year-old officer remains in critical condition in the ICU. The 2 other injured victims are a 61-year-old woman who is still in the hospital. We're told she is doing well, and a 70-year-old man who was shot multiple times in the chest. He is in critical condition. He's already had 1 surgery. We're told he's expected to have at least 1 more, if not 2. The list of those injured and those killed would likely be much longer, though, if it weren't for the actions of Rabbi Jonathan Perlman, who pushed several congregants into a closet after the first shots were fired.
I'm pressed up against the wall. Carol is kneeling on the floor to my right, and the gentleman walks in with a long gun, and I could see the jacket he had on and a pair of pants of some sort. He didn't see us. Thank God. So I could see that he looked around only because there was a shaft of light as he opened the door. He stepped over Mel's body, didn't pay any attention, stepped back and walked out.
A few minutes later, that group was rescued by SWAT officers who took them through a back door, and this really could have been that much worse if officers hadn't been here on the scene within minutes of this shooting started, and they were being praised for that today, Shep.
The coming together in Squirrel Hill and really across greater Pittsburgh has really been uplifting.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see, Shep. As you mentioned, the Squirrel Hill neighborhood here, it really is the backbone of the Jewish community here, and there's been an outpouring of support from across the city, the nation, and really the world. You can see here behind me this vigil that has been growing over the last few days. Is hundreds of people have been coming by with flowers and cards and notes. You also mentioned the 11 Stars of David that have been brought here with the names of the 11 victims. Last night, thousands of people attended one of the many other vigils that have been taking place across the city over the last couple of days as people mourn and process this attack. But the resounding message that we keep hearing from folks is that folks of all faiths is that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Funeral plans are starting to come together now as well. The first funeral taking place tomorrow at noon for a pair of brothers, Cecil and David Rosenthal. They lived with developmental disabilities. As you mentioned, friends say they were inseparable and never missed a Saturday of worship. Theirs is just one of the many stories that we will be hearing and reflecting on over the days to come. Shep.
Garrett Tenney there at the synagogue. It's hard to think about what happened Saturday morning, isn't it? It really was for me. Unless and until you remember where to focus. And President Reagan's speechwriter, of all people, will help us out with that before this hour is up. But next, the synagogue member and doctor, medical doctor, who says he looked that suspect in the eye and spoke with him after the shooting. He's our guest next. First hospital workers to treat the man accusing 11 people at the synagogue were all Jewish. That's according to Dr. Jeff Cohen. He's the president of the Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh. The suspect went there with gunshot wounds after exchanging fire with police. Dr. Cohen happens to be a member of the Tree of Life Synagogue. And the doctor says he visited the suspect to try to understand why. Dr. Cohen is with us now. So good of you. I'm so very sorry.
Thank you, Shep.
Did you learn anything?
About the entire incident or
I'm not going to try to put anything in you. I read what you did, and whatever you'd like to share with us, I'd be very interested to hear.
So Saturday morning was a very tough day, and unfortunately I got a bird's eye view of what happened is that we live catty-corner to Tree of Life Synagogue. The events that transpired have been well documented in the press. I just want to point out a couple things, is that the police did a fantastic job of organizing it and protecting the people in the street from getting hurt. They ran to trouble. They ran to danger. They hid behind a wall in anticipation of breaching the synagogue to try and help people. As things unfolded, the first 6 officers that I saw were getting ready to move in and try and help. And then the other officers behind them were not walking or trotting, they were running to danger.
Running toward, not running from.
Right. They were also instructed to use a vehicle as a shield, and they weren't waiting for any vehicles. They took this upon themselves to, as they were taught, to organize the area and respond. And all the people that were there, the EMS, the FBI, the ATF, the bomb squads, it was very organized, and the response was tremendous from the community. And similarly I was standing with the EMS personnel, just trying to, if I could be of any help, could I be of help? And I heard the tactical radios and what was going on, and we actually heard the gunshots. There was a series of about 20 to 30 gunshots that we heard.
Oh, my God.
And you could hear when they finally got Mr. Bowers under control, and they were bringing him out, and I contacted my hospital by text to let them know that he'd be coming over there. So the people at my hospital, at Allegheny General, were organized. As I understood, the gentleman was getting off of the ambulance, and he was continuing with his rant of kill all the Jews. What he didn't realize was that the nurse that took care of him, his father's a rabbi, and the doctor in the emergency room is Jewish. And, these people put aside their whatever beliefs they had about what this gentleman was, and to us, he's a patient. So he was treated like a patient. He got excellent care at Allegheny. And also a shout out to the other people in the community. They had no idea what they were getting at Presby or Mercy, but they took care of people, and they were ready to do what healthcare professionals do, which is take care of patients. I have to tell you, I'm very proud of them. So the message is that this community responded as you would expect it to, where they stood up and they ran to danger. They took care of a person regardless of what he had done or allegedly had done. And to us, he was a patient and needed help, and that's what we did. So I also had the opportunity to talk to the nurse yesterday morning, and we talked for about 20 minutes. He's a very impressive young man. His parents should be very proud of him. I also came back later in the day after the Steelers game, of course. That's religion around here. and I talked to the shooter. And I just wanted to see him. I was curious as to what this gentleman was and just make sure he was being taken care of. As president of the hospital, there's lots of people that we visited, and I was very curious about who he was and what he was. So I went up and I talked to the police that were guarding his room, and he was segregated in one of our trauma units away from everybody else so he wouldn't interfere with the normal hospital operations. Made sure the police were comfortable. I thanked the Pittsburgh police officers for their bravery. And I asked them if it was okay if I talked to him. They said, sure, have at it. I just walked in and he was a little groggy. He said, are you in pain? Are you okay? And he acknowledged that, and he was okay. He wasn't in pain. And he asked me who I was, and I said, I'm Dr. Cohen. I'm the president of the hospital. And I left. And quite honestly, he's just a guy. You know, and how he got to where he was and how he could possibly think the 9 people that died at the synagogue, I'm sorry, the 11. We know these people. My mother-in-law goes there. We were actually concerned that she was in the synagogue that Saturday morning. These are people that she's very comfortable with, very friendly. And, you know, these people aren't harmful to anyone.
No.
So the ironies of all this, that the first people that took care of him were all Jewish.
Dr. Cohen, just immeasurable respect. Many thanks for your time, and deepest condolences to you and everyone there.
Thank you, Shep.
We'll be right back. Capital punishment is ultimately up to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Our Chief Intelligence Correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is live in Washington. Catherine?
Thanks, Jeff. This weekend, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions swiftly issued a statement that made clear the death penalty is on the table. It reads in part, these alleged crimes are reprehensible and utterly repugnant to the values of this nation. Accordingly, the Department of Justice will file hate crimes and other criminal charges against the defendant, including charges that could lead to the death penalty. A short time ago, Bowers waived a reading of the criminal complaint against him in court, which does include the possible penalties if convicted. The Attorney General and his deputy today made clear the crime merited the most severe punishment.
You can be sure that our team, the FBI and Department of Justice, on this case right now, charges have already been filed, and we intend to do our duty in this matter with vigor and integrity.
Shortly after the suspect was taken down, the FBI told reporters that he was armed with an AR-15 rifle and 3 handguns, Shep.
How does the DOJ review work, Catherine?
Well, there's a multifaceted review process that considers specific factors. Those relevant factors include the strength of the evidence, the suspect's past criminal history, aggravating factors such as whether the crime was committed in a particularly heinous and cruel manner, as well as the level of premeditation. Other factors include the number of victims and the impact on the survivors. If the Justice Department approves the death penalty, the trial will have 2 phases, the guilt phase and then a second phase where the jury decides whether the death penalty is warranted. Both the prosecution and defense at that time have more latitude to present evidence that goes to or against these aggravating factors, Shep.
Catherine Herridge, live in Washington. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The White House held a rare briefing today. John Roberts is there. Hello, John.
Good afternoon to you, Shep. Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, first time we've seen her since October the 3rd at the podium, and getting visibly emotional at several places when she was talking about the heinous shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue over the weekend, calling it an atrocity, a chilling act of hatred, evil. The press secretary also saying that Americans of all faith are coming together in the wake of this, but she also was defending the president, who sent out tweets today blaming the news media for sowing much of the anger and division that causes hatred in this country. Listen here.
The president's not responsible for these acts. Again, the very first action that the president did was condemn these heinous acts. The very first thing that the media did was condemn the president and go after and try to place blame, not just on the president, but everybody that works in this administration.
Sarah Sanders also announcing this afternoon that the president will be heading to Pittsburgh tomorrow. My understanding is that he's going to be attending some sort of service at a synagogue somewhere in the neighborhood of the Tree of Life, but clearly he'll be staying away from the Tree of Life Synagogue itself. 11 Jewish leaders, though, have come out publicly to say that the president is not welcome in their community unless and until he fully denounces white nationalism. I asked the press secretary this afternoon if this White House and the president has been doing enough to do that. Listen here.
The president has denounced racism, hatred, and bigotry in all forms on a number of occasions. We'll continue to do that. I'm doing it here today. And I would also say at the same time that some individuals, they're grieving, they're hurting. The president wants to be there to show the support of this administration for the Jewish community. The rabbi said that he is welcome as well. And certainly we want to show our support.
The president wants to make tomorrow a moment to bring the country together. We should get details later on this afternoon as to exactly where he's going to go and what he will do. Shep.
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. Thank you. The man who investigators say sent more than a dozen homemade bombs to well-known Democrats and targets of the president's ire is in court today, just after an FBI bomb squad responded to yet another suspicious package. Another one sent to CNN. We'll have a live report from the courthouse in Miami. That's just ahead. Appeared in court today for the first time. Cesar Sayoc faces 5 federal charges and a possible prison sentence that could put him behind bars for the rest of his life. He has a long history of trouble with the law. Investigators say he sent mail bombs to a dozen targets, including 2 former presidents. Officials discovered the packages over the last week. And today, the FBI reports its bomb squad is investigating a similar package that somebody sent to CNN in Atlanta. Phil Keating with the news. He's live outside the courthouse in Miami. Phil?
Inside the courtroom, Shepard, Cesar Sayoc, the pipe bomb suspect, appeared relatively calm, very somber. Clearly realizes he is in a significant amount of trouble at this point. There was a moment during the proceedings where he glanced around the courtroom, standing room only, by the way, spotted his sister and actually teared up a little bit. 56-year-old Cesar Sayoc hardly spoke, invoking his right to remain silent, and as is always the case with initial appearances for defendants, Magistrate Edwin Torres read all 5 federal counts against him. Sayoc was shackled and wearing standard prison scrubs. FBI agents took Sayoc into custody Friday morning in Broward County at an AutoZone parking lot after matching his fingerprints with a latent fingerprint on one of the 14 pipe bomb packages. And over the weekend, he obtained a 3-man team of lawyers, some of whom had represented him before.
Pardon the interruption.
Offering a new light.
Rabbi Jeffrey Meyer speaking in Pittsburgh now. Live coverage on Fox News.
People will come and say, wow, that's how you're supposed to live your life. It starts with one simple step. Just stop the hate. Don't say it. Zip the lip. Just don't say it. It just takes one person to make that difference. The question I have for you is, any of you that person to do that? I leave you with that question. You have to answer it for us. Within the Jewish tradition, there's a memorial prayer that's recited in memory of our deceased. Permit me to share with you the text in English first, and then I'll be chanting it in Hebrew, and at that time, I'll ask you to rise. The text roughly reads, O Lord of mercy and compassion, you who dwell in the heights with the holy and the pure, we beseech you to accept the souls of these 11 beautiful people who gave their lives to honor your glorious name. O Lord of mercy, bound them up in the wings of life eternal, for you are their portion. May they all rest in peace. As we all say, Amen, and please rise.
Well, we wanted to stay for the Pittsburgh Symphony, but the feed went out. Mourning, committing them to God. Casey Jordan is a criminologist and attorney. She's with us now. This is the hardest thing we do. It's the hardest thing we do. And we know, because we've lived for a minute,
Right.
we know that the rhetoric that we're hearing now can't be helpful. This can't be coincidental, or could it be?
No, I don't think there's a coincidence. I think that these continued incidents that we're seeing are feeding each other. And there are going to be people out there emotionally disturbed, vulnerable, enraged. In sociology, we like to call them anomic. They have anomie, a sense of normlessness. They don't know what is normal anymore. They feel like they're playing by the rules, but it's not helping. It isn't fulfilling their agenda. And so they seek to place blame, to find reason where there is none. And their inability to cope with loss or with hardship makes them scapegoat onto others, a different population. We could fill in the blank with women, any racial group, any religious group, and the Democrats, Republicans. That need for people consumed by hate to fill in the blank with someone to blame is the problem. And when one person does it, it really inspires somebody else to do it as well. Maybe a different target group, but prevention is always worth a pound of cure.
Two things we're talking about here. This one in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
There's a Jewish organization that brings refugees. They are lauded and loved in greater Pittsburgh.
They're human rights advocates.
They're human rights advocates, and they're helping people who need help. And
correct.
He equates that with the
invaders,
the not coming to get you, not caravan of invaders,
right,
that politicians are using to gin up fear,
correct,
to get them to the polls. And he says, that was it. I'm going in. And he murdered those 11 people.
And there's no
shut
logic
up about drawing lines.
Right.
This rhetoric exists. This man said this thing, and now this thing happened. So stop it. Look in the mirror and calm down.
Right. And at some point, there was a huge leap that was not based on logic.
No,
it was
of course
clearly
not.
Reactionary. And
you turn up the crazy, and the crazies come out.
Right, but it was fed. You have to understand that, even though we all love social media, that
no, we don't.
Okay,
Go
good.
ahead.
We're on the same page. But the key is that people can find each other and inspire each other and validate that anomie, that normlessness, where they feel emboldened to go out and act on something that maybe just a few days ago seemed inconceivable. So yes, the rhetoric needs to die down, the civility needs to pump up, people need to lead by example and have a civil conversation no matter, never forget that people can't hear you when you're yelling, and if they already are predisposed to disagree with you, they not only can't hear you, but they might become reactionary.
Yeah. Dr. Casey Jordan, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
We'll be right back.
The media said our first generation PXG.
Ooh, the markets turned bad this afternoon. The Dow in a free fall this afternoon. It was up 350 in early trading, and then all of a sudden, tech stocks, technology stocks started to really sink, and some serious worries around the country and around the globe really about global trade. That coupled, you heard this Boeing jet crashed on takeoff from Jakarta in Indonesia. Just a horrible tragedy there. Boeing off about 8% on the day today. So a lot of factors on the market, but the numbers are all down. The U.S. will deploy some 5,000 troops to the southern border as early tomorrow as thousands of migrants make their way north from Mexico. Tomorrow. The migrants, according to Fox News reporting, are more than 2 months away, if any of them actually come here. But tomorrow is 1 week before the midterm election, which is what all of this is about. There is no invasion. No one's coming to get you. There's nothing at all to worry about. When they did this to us, got us all riled up in April, remember? The result was 14 arrests. We're America, we can handle it. But, like I said, a week to the election, and Jennifer Griffin's on it from the Pentagon. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Shepard. Well, a senior U.S. defense official tells me that U.S. troops are actually already flowing to the southern border. And today, 800, I'm told, have arrived. Another 200 are set to arrive tomorrow. This video provided by DOD show members of the 89th Military Police Brigade out of Fort Hood, Texas, deploying. By Saturday, we're told 1,700 active duty U.S. troops will be in position along the border. I can confirm that a total of 5,200 active duty troops will be sent to the border with Mexico between now and December 15th. They are expected to be mostly in place by next week, but that number could rise. The order signed by Defense Secretary Mattis on Friday authorizes helicopters to provide strategic lift. 400 U.S. troops will be needed for those helicopters. All in all, the troops sent will include ground personnel, we're told, military planners, troops with engineering capability, medical personnel. They will set up 3 unified command centers, temporary shelters for up to 2,400 Customs and Border Patrol personnel, riot gear for 500 CBP agents. Right now, the rules of engagement for these troops, these active duty U.S. troops, have not been established, but the order that Mattis signed Friday outlines that Border Patrol want DOD personnel to be, quote, in direct contact with migrants and protesters. But that order that Mattis signed says this may present issues under the Posse Comitatus Act, which, of course, bars U.S. troops from being used in this way, Shep.
Any word on costs here?
Well, I'm told the Pentagon, not DHS, will pay for this deployment of troops. The comptroller here at the Pentagon is working on those figures now, and Congress will expect an answer soon. They won't want that money deferred from other projects by law. They can't move that money. In the past, DHS has reimbursed the Pentagon when troops were sent to the border, but the order Mattis signed says the cost will be on a, quote, non-reimbursable basis. Bottom line is it's expensive. Earlier this year, when the Pentagon sent about 2,000 troops to the border, it cost $185 million. And when President Bush sent 6,000 National Guard to the border, it cost $1.2 billion, Shep.
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Nice to see you, Jen. Thanks. Now, that jet crash of a Boeing jet that's helping drive down the markets today, a top Indonesian official says no survivors are expected after the jet crashed into the Java Sea with 189 people on board. Rescuers say so far they found some debris, some personal belongings, and they have found some human remains, but they haven't been able to find what they're describing as the main wreckage. A low-cost Indonesian airline with a spotty safety record called Lion Air owned the plane. Transportation officials say the pilot requested to return to base just a few minutes after takeoff. Benjamin Hall with late developments tonight from London. Ben?
Yeah, hi, Shep. What brought this plane down is still a mystery. Weather conditions were almost perfect for flying. The pilots were both very experienced. 5,000 and 6,000 hours of flying time each, and the plane was practically brand new. There was also no signs of an explosion. We can tell that from burn marks that they have not found on some of the debris. But as you say, 3 minutes after takeoff.
To do that, I leave you with that question. You have to answer it.
Getting through it all of this horrible news. Peggy Noonan is helpful. That's coming up.